Previously on From.
I hear their voices. They said it was the only way to go home.
Sarah, just tell me what you did.
I left the door open.
Are you living in town or Colony House?
Town.
Julie.
Colony House.
Why are you doing this?
What's wrong? I think maybe I made a mistake. Julie, there are no mistakes, just choices. And you chose what was right for you. And that matters.
Come on, try it out.
Every single one of these pins is a different resident who drove in from a different location.
That is fucking impossible. I don't just sit around accepting the world as it is. Someone is doing this, and I'm not gonna rest until I figure out how.
I wish you had the luxury of grief, but you don't, Boyd. These people need you. You need to be the one to lead these people home. Because if you don't, she died for nothing.
What are you doing here? You promised you'd stay home.
If I didn't show up, they would have wondered why. It'll be okay.
Sarah.
I promise. Do you want to help me bring over the rest of the food?
Yeah.
I just feel so broken.
We're gonna figure it out together. Don't worry. What you got there?
Sweet potato.
Ooh.
Nice family.
Sarah!
Hey. Oh, no. Okay, grab her arm. Hold on.
Oof, lots of tense moments in that recap. Welcome to an all-new episode of From, the Epics series that is playing right now. I'm going to welcome my guest. I'm sorry, he's not my guest. He's my co-host. My co-host, Kinte. Kinte, how are you?
I'm doing excellent. I'm so happy to be here and talking some From.
So sorry to introduce you as my guest. I am
your guest. I'm
living in headspace on another podcast. I'm so sorry. So Kinte is firmly the co-host. So just throwing that out there.
Firm, extra firm, y'all.
Yes, indeed. However you want to characterize it, you go do you. I'm here for it. I'm gonna start out and say, last episode we had lots of spooky creepiness happening. Like, we uncovered so much of the town and some history and some really weird events that happened. In this episode, it felt like it was all about the characters. All the characters doing either their level best to just ignore whatever the heck is going on, or they are trying to dig so far under the surface that it feels like they might end up having a mental breakdown. I don't know. The name of this episode is Silhouettes, and it is the 5th of the episodes in season 1. This was a crazy episode. Before I even get into any events, tell me what you thought about this episode. Just overall, how did you feel about it?
Oh, it's a very good episode. It had a lot of events that are very memorable in it. I don't want to get too deep into it because we're going to talk about it, but a lot of twists and turns and a big moment later on. So, yeah, it's very good. And we have 2 random Black people that we didn't see before, a woman and a guy. So that's pretty cool.
That's right. It is a little bit odd that just in terms of the makeup of the town, it feels incredibly random. Also, big shout out to Ryan. Hi, Ryan. How are you? I absolutely felt like this episode was pivotal in terms of understanding how these characters can go forward in any way, shape, or form. And I'm going to start out with talking about Sarah and Christy. But I'm going to quickly pivot to Julie and Fatima, because I feel like we have this gorgeous juxtaposition happening between the girls in this town, the women in this town, and those two groups make up quite an interesting dynamic. So we see Christy and Sarah talking in the makeshift hospital that they have, and Sarah. We find out that Sarah is maybe not quite as like mentally disturbed as much as she is absolutely persecuted by whatever these beings are that are in the town. Not only did they give her the instruction to kill the driver, Jade's partner, Jade's driver, um, but also she also has the message that's written on her arm, kill the boy. And it seems to me like whatever is happening to her, it's enormous. At first I thought she was just sort of like maybe mentally unstable. And now I'm starting to think that that's not actually the case. What did you think?
Oh, I mean, she's definitely mentally unstable, but it just depends on the source of it. Was she
Right.
mentally unstable when she was not on, not there, or did it just come about?
Well,
Here at the
later
town.
later in this episode we're going to discover no spoilers because it's in this episode, but later in this episode we discover that Sarah and her brother have only been in the town for a couple months.
Mm-hmm.
And that seems really surprising because it feels like Sarah and Nathan are actually like firmly entrenched in the town.
Right.
So that was, to me, that was a huge, they're already using Sarah as some kind of conduit by which to do stuff. That's, I don't know, that just, it felt
Maybe it takes a certain type of person for you know what I'm saying, like, in order to get what they need. Maybe there's something about her that lends herself to be used as a conduit.
like you have to be
also
open to the message.
Yeah, and also in this we have Jade seeing visions, so that I don't think other people are seeing the same kind of visions.
Okay, that's super true as well. Yeah, it seems like it feels like to me the conversation between Sarah and Christy opened up a lot of doors. It gave us a kind of the idea about who Christy is as a person, the fact that she has a girlfriend that she thinks is waiting for her back home. Um, we don't get, I don't think, a clear timeline about how long Christy has been there. I don't remember hearing that specific piece, but it feels like it's been a while, at least a couple years. And that feels kind of important too, but she still seems to think that her girlfriend will be waiting for her. And then she also tells Sarah, when Sarah says, "You and Kenny make a cute couple," she says to Sarah, "No, we're just friends," right? But clearly everybody else thinks of them as a couple, which is also kind of, I felt like that might be sort of an interesting character development piece. I don't know.
Let me ask this question just as a side note, or put this out there. Do you think time is running the same? Like, do you think time on the outside world is running like there? So maybe, maybe a year in the town could be only a couple of days in the outside world, or or the opposite. A small time in the town could be. I mean, the only way we would know this is somebody got out and then see how much time has elapsed.
Okay, so no spoilers from this, because the next episode that we're going to talk about basically will have, I think, a key in it based on a flashback that Jade has. And so I don't want to spoil that part, but I will say that it feels incredibly similar in the sense that the people who are there, even Victor, um, recognize all the technology that is there, are able to use things without sort of looking at them like, oh my God, that's crazy cool, or, oh, cell phones, or like nothing feels like it is out of place. So it feels to me like all of these people all come from a very similar time and space. And because of that, it does seem like it is possible that time on the outside is running in a out of sync with time inside of the town because it feels way too contained. Like if these people can never leave, aside from I guess the massacre where basically the town reset itself except for Victor, um all the people that are there now have no history with the town. It's just it began again after Victor came out of the storm cellar because there was no one left. So everyone there is at the very least post Victor. And so that does kind of lend itself to that. But then I'm also going to say that in the next episode, we get a hint of something where maybe this town has been resetting itself for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And that also feels like, that was something that I actually thought about pretty early on. And it had to do with Victor measuring the trees, which I'm still completely obsessed about. Where it feels like if he's counting the trees, counting the spaces between the house and the trees, and the house seems to be important, why is he doing that? And then that line that Kenny says where he says, I feel like we're running out of spaces. That to me, both of those things combined to me feel like, yeah, maybe something really catastrophic is about to happen. So anyway, that was my thought about that. Let's let's go back real quick to Sarah and Christy. So they have a nice conversation and it felt really character developing. I really liked it. I actually started to feel a little bit more sympathetic towards Sarah until, or even at the moment, when I remembered that she was still eyeing the scalpel in the drawer.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I kind of always knew that, of course, Sarah would try. And at the same time, I got this huge message at the very beginning when Nathan wants to see his sister, and basically Sarah has said, I don't want to see him. I don't want to see Nathan. Why do you think that Sarah didn't want to see Nathan? I have my own idea, but why do you think Sarah didn't want to see Nathan?
I think basically it's then she has to be forced with, he knows her like no one else knows her, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and he could talk to her like no one else can talk to her. And I think she just didn't want that, to deal with that, knowing what was instructed to do too.
I think that she thought that if Nathan could see her, talk to her, that she would feel compelled in some way to tell him what was going on, or that she might have second thoughts. And we figure all of this, out that she thinks that this is the only way to go home. And I feel like she's doing this in some ways for Nathan. She says a couple of times, I think at some point, all I have is Nathan.
Mm-hmm.
And it feels like her motivations are very deeply rooted in her brother. And yet at the same time, I think you're right. I think she knows that he sees her differently than everybody else sees her. So he might be able to see into the fact that she's struggling with something. And also, of course, we know that Nathan also knows that she did something earlier, and that she just wouldn't talk about it. And he's really worried about whatever that was. And then later we discover that Nathan finds the bloody clothes and basically goes to confront her. So, there's that too. That piece seems, man, so much is going on for these guys. I feel really sad for them. And then Christy says to Sarah, Sarah postulates, what would you do if there was a way, basically, the Spock question. Do the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many?
Mm-hmm.
What did you think about that, the whole conversation piece?
Well, obviously she's trying to figure out, is she in the wrong for, wanting to do, to kill this kid in order to, to potentially save her own life, right? And
Mm-hmm.
she just wants to know, like, she's trying to get, she's essentially trying to get uh, a she's basically trying to get like an okay, like, you know what, it is okay, you can go ahead and do this, like, you know what
Right.
I mean?
She wants absolution for the
Absolution.
idea that she has. Yes, yes. I completely agree with that. At this point, I'm gonna say one thing because we're basically into exactly where this happens. From does this thing where they have a really long intro before they roll their intro credit. Their intro, the theme song, Que Sera, and it sometimes it feels like I almost forget that we haven't that isn't even the episode proper, that's just the intro, because so much happens in those intros before the credit opening theme starts to roll. um and it always sort of like takes me out of time and space, because at this point in this episode, it's what we discover is that Nathan is sitting at the dining table, and he's looking at Sarah's blood-soaked dress, right? And then we cut to the intro credits, and it leaves everything just hanging in the air in this very dramatic fashion. And then you realize, oh, okay, now the episode can start. It's kind of cool. I actually really give them a lot of credit for doing that. It's very long. The intro is very long. um so also during this intro, we also discover that Jim, it feels to me like Jim and Tabitha, well, Jim is definitely uh making sort of his plan for, we're going to figure this out. We're going to make a game out of this. We're going to find out what's going on. And he uses, well, actually, we don't see it at that point, but he decides that he's going to use the wall as his whiteboard and write down every question that he has about where he is at. And so we start to see Jim's thinking process definitely as a much more logical thinker instead of an emotional thinker. He really is trying to come up with some kind of critical thinking logic that would explain where they are, why they are, how they are. Which I thought was, that's kind of interesting. That was a good take. I like that. What did you think
Yeah,
about
because
that?
it actually makes him look like he's not just a bonehead. Like, he actually may know, he may be able to be of some use. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I have to say that as a viewer, it gives me a little something to think. Oh, well, maybe he will figure this out. Like I got a bit of hope in that idea that, oh yeah, hey, this is a good thing. Maybe if we just, keep our faith in Jim, we can figure out what's going on. Maybe there's something on that whiteboard that will tell us what we need to know. It was kind of cool. Also, I really love Ethan's response to writing on the wall. You want me to write on the wall?
Hilarious.
I really did like that. Um, okay, so let's cut back to Sarah and Christy again. Christy tells Sarah, hey, listen, the needs of the many in my head, sure, they outweigh the needs of the one. And if I was going to have to do someone a wrong, hypothetically, in order to get everybody home, yeah, I guess I would. Not, of course, not knowing that Sarah was going to really act on that. And then, okay, let's talk a little bit about how the dynamic is now. We're gonna cut completely away from Christy and Sarah and move over to Julie and Fatima.
Right.
Okay. Now, I've actually talked to people who were like, Colony House seems like it's a cult. I don't
Yeah.
actually think it's a cult. I think it's communal living. It's a commune. It is everything that used to be like a very 1960s and 70s sort of premise about you live together, you share together. We saw that in the last episode with Julie, with
Very
somebody
hippy
stealing
dippy.
Julie's clothes. Yes, yes, everything is shared. You know, you don't actually keep anything to yourself. It's very interesting. Um, but when we see them going, clearly, Julie's having some second thoughts, I guess. Um, and so Fatima takes her to this place where it, I don't know how to describe this except to say, um, man, how do these people stay so untroubled by what's happening? I don't. There's something so almost utopian about the lifestyle up there. Give me how do you think about this? Give me some ideas about your thoughts, because I I I struggle with this a little bit. Like, they just don't seem like they. It's not that they don't care. Obviously, they care. And Donna makes it very clear that there's something big going on, and she knows. But just in terms of how they live, it just feels so unfettered. What did you
Yeah.
think, or how do you
I'm,
think about
I'm
it?
sorry. You were cutting up a little bit. Can you? I'm so sorry. Can you repeat the question one more time?
So what I was asking is, what are you thinking right now in terms of what we see between Fatima and Julie, right? And they go
Hmm.
up to this place and they go swimming, and how how do you think that the people that are up there, how do you think that they are responding, or why are they responding in a way that seems so untroubled in comparison to the people in the town?
Oh, it's because I think they got an attitude of they can't they can only deal with what is in front of them, right? They can only deal with what is in whatever the thing is of the day, and they're
Hmm.
just gonna live life, and they'll let everybody else worry about all of that stuff.
I don't know. Like, sometimes I kind of wonder if there isn't something to being at Colony House that lends itself in some way to almost like the communal living is sort of kind of, I don't know, like a tranquilizer, like, kind of drug like it really helps those people feel as if community amongst themselves is more important than even the basic acts of survival and togetherness in the town, which seems much more concerned about, management and where does the food come from and how do we get everybody fed, and like Kenny's mom, um, how do we keep law and order with Boyd and Kenny. Those kinds of things seem like, okay, well, these are the important things, and then Colony House seems like, well, how do we maintain our sanity in this time? And maybe the best way to do it is just basically do what Fatima does, which is kind of ignore everything and look at things from the higher perspective. Look, from up here it doesn't look like there are any monsters. From up here it looks beautiful and gorgeous, and the world can just be exactly what it is. Right? Does that make sense?
That makes perfect sense. Yeah, and
It Go ahead.
yeah, I mean, maybe I'm getting off a little bit, but I wonder if once they start killing in the house, can you escape from it?
Hmm.
So because if Colony House ever became, you know, up for grabs, I just wonder. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm thinking out loud, but I was just wondering that, like, if they get in there, all those people are going to be gone, or
Well,
can you retreat somewhere else?
that was the. I think that was the point of showing us when Sarah left the door open at the top of the clinic, right?
Uh-huh.
The monsters could even get through into that room, into the boiler room or whatever, the heater room, the room that basically was off of the main room. But it was
Right,
it was in sort of a separate room, and she had closed the door.
right.
So clearly, and the reason that of course that the barrier didn't hold is because there was no talisman,
Hmm.
or at least that's what we think. Um, So it does seem like, and again, if we go back to episode 2, Colony House, they tie people up. They tie them up and they keep them very secure until they can figure out, are you friend or foe? And
Right.
and what's her name? Donna even says, just because you tell me something is true, basically, I mean, I'm paraphrasing, doesn't mean that I can necessarily believe that it's true.
Right.
Like we actually have to go through these procedures because this is the way that we keep each other safe, which is a completely different idea from the town, which is sort of like not every man for himself, but every sort of unit for itself,
Right.
right, does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So it's a totally different way of thinking, but it's interesting to me in this episode when we see them all up on the rocks and swimming and kind of having a good time, that there is sort of a see no evil, hear no evil is equal to know no evil. And it's just such a, oh god, it's so weird. It makes me feel like everything else that's happening in the town is it doesn't permeate up there. It doesn't penetrate any of what they're thinking. It's like a totally separate world almost, which is
Then
super interesting.
that's how you can, the Matthews daughter. That's how you can kind of understand why she would choose it, because the way that they're living is a much more appealing way
Hmm.
to live. You know.
Yeah. There's you get less freedom, but you get less responsibility too, which is, yeah, I can see why that would be appealing. Um, so just going back to Tabitha now. Remember that Tabitha says, she says, there's one question that we're not asking, and I assumed that the one question that she was thinking, are we not asking, was, is this hell? I assumed that. It's not what she eventually wrote, but uh, but but I feel like that is where the show keeps trying to say, "Oh, hey, maybe you guys should think about this." And I feel like that is such a red herring. I don't. I, I think I said this before in a previous podcast. I don't think they're in hell. This isn't purgatory. I don't it doesn't feel that way. It feels, although I'm going to say right off, at some point someone says, "Does it matter?"
Yeah. Priest.
Right. Uh yes, Father Kotri. Uh and he's right. It doesn't matter. It At this point, even though we're super invested in what is the mystery and what is happening here, he's absolutely right. To the people in the town, it doesn't matter. They're there. So they're going to experience whatever they're going to experience, and it doesn't matter why they're going to experience it. But I at first I felt like that was him giving up hope, and then I realized, no, actually that's not him giving up hope. That's him saying that no matter what hope is out there, um, we still have to deal with whatever is happening here. For whatever purpose it is that we are here, we have to deal with this too, which I thought was actually super pragmatic. So I was kind of impressed by that.
Yeah, I agree.
Um, okay, let's talk about the scene where Sarah decides to leave, right?
Mhm.
And she goes over to the Matthews' house,
Mhm.
and she,
And at this point, she's trusted.
yes,
Unlike Victor, who means no harm, but it just shows you, right?
yes,
Yeah.
which I also found kind of interesting, um simply because I think it 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 delves into the sense of what you see on the outside is not necessarily the thing you should trust. And I use that as like, okay, this is sort of a metaphor for a lot of what's happening in the story. What you see is maybe not exactly what you should think it is. It might be hiding something darker or different underneath.
Hmm.
Um Okay, so Sarah goes over and she says to uh, Mrs. Matthews, Tabitha, hey, can I hang out with your son? To whatever. Ethan goes out and begins to tell Sarah all about his imaginary world. And I kind of loved that. I love the fact that Ethan seems to keep having this connection to this made up story. And the idea that the made up story also involves Julie. It just feels like maybe there's something important in that, because remember that story is about monsters. And then remember that uh in the RV in the beginning, one of Ethan's biggest gripes about Julie is that Julie killed Norman, who is basically the protagonist of Ethan's story.
Right.
And that I love the fact that Ethan then tells Sarah this story, and Sarah, it just completely doesn't seem to phase Sarah at all. Um, but clearly there's something for us to understand there, which I thought was kind of cool. Okay, so Sarah, I don't want to get into the later stuff, but Sarah basically invites Ethan to go look at the animals because Nathan takes care of the animals. And they have goats, and she's like, yeah, we can go see the goats. Okay, so we're going to cut and intersect this with Jade, our, super techie guy. And he goes into the bar, and oh my God, I really freaking love this. The bartender, first of all, Jade is very unimpressed with their liquor. And the bartender says something along the lines of, you get a group of people together, what's the first thing that they do? Basically they make liquor.
Right.
Which I kind of loved. And the idea that there's like this cantina in the middle of town, it really offends Jade a lot. Not because he doesn't want to have a bar, but because why are you guys drinking instead of trying to figure out what's going on?
Right.
Yeah, what did you think about that whole scene? I loved it. I thought it was great.
I thought it was hilarious. And Jade, I know you don't like Jade, but I like his character, and because he's so different than everybody else, So he's like a wild card, where you're gonna get things from his character that you're just not gonna get from anybody else,
No, see, there's a difference. It's not that I don't like Jade. It's that what I was saying before was I don't like that type of person. That the person that Jade is meant to sort of represent sometimes can be so obtuse in a way that is, yes, they are brilliant, and yes, they are absolutely super smart, and they can get to the heart of so much, but they are so busy thinking about their own moral superiority that sometimes it's like it becomes eclipsed. And I didn't like that. That was the only thing that I thought, oh, that's where they're going with him. But as time goes on, Jade becomes more and more of an interesting character. There's more interesting facets to him, I think, than perhaps we were even given at the beginning. So, and the bartender brings up a really good point, right? The bartender basically talks about Schrodinger's cat. And I love that, because that sort of harkens back to what you had been talking about before, which was this idea of, well, is time actually happening linear on the outside of town like it is on the inside of town? And it goes along with this idea. If you put the town away from where everybody can see it, does it actually exist? So if people don't know where you are, do you actually still exist? And like, to me, that was sort of an interesting idea, because it kind of gave us the idea that they talked about, well, if everybody assumes that we're dead, yet we're alive, which reality should we be living in? Or not even which reality should we be living in? What is going to be the perception of where and who we are? Which, again, there is this complicated sense of, these people get it. It's just some are choosing to be more accepting, and some are choosing to basically lose their minds. Um, and then some are forced into these situations like Sarah, where, yeah, maybe they're acting on stuff that is not even, that we can't even possibly understand. I don't know, there's so many aspects to this, but this particular scene felt very important. Like the oasis here felt very important. I can't overstate how much I think these little snippets matter to our understanding of how things are happening here. Um, okay, I'm gonna say one other thing about this scene. Um, the bartender tells Jade that if he can get the, I can't remember exactly how he said it, but he says something about if he can get the radio to work, that people outside the box would at least know that they're still alive, is somehow important to understanding how they're thinking about their own existence. So, as an example, right? If we use the Schrodinger's cat sort of example, if the people in the town can be seen or heard, then they actually exist, which lends a brand new level of, hey, we got to get out of here feeling to what's happening, instead of, oh, we just have to exist here happening, right?
Right.
Um, and so that sort of translates back to what we were talking about at Colony House, where it will no longer be okay to just, oh, hey, this is just where we are. We just have to figure it out because here's where we are. It's not going to change. If someone actually did hear them on the outside, then, oh, all of a sudden there actually is something happening and the stakes get higher. In some ways, I feel like the radio is kind of like the Horton Hears a Who kind of idea, where there's all of these things happening and no one knows about it, and then one small sound comes out and all of a sudden people are like, oh yeah, of course, there's something, they are someplace, there is something happening here. Okay, but we don't know exactly how that's gonna unfold because we don't have any information yet about how in the world they could get enough power, right, to be able to get in touch with the outside world, which I also thought was kind of crazy. Clearly there's electricity in this town. I mean, like, that was one of the first things that we all noticed when the people that were watching it with me. There's electricity in this town. Where is the electricity coming from?
Right.
Right? I mean, the diner has enough power to have a neon sign outside. The jukebox goes off randomly, which is always so weird. They can cook food. Where is all of this stuff coming from? I feel like there are so many questions to that are just so out there. And also, ironically, going to be discovered in, not discovered, but uncovered in sort of the next episode. Okay. So I gotta ask you, I gotta ask you this, because I feel like this keeps coming up over and over again. Every time something happens, it and it feels like it might be important. Something else happens that kind of not counterbalances, but draws our attention away from it. And I was wondering if you noticed any of that happening.
Interesting. I never thought about that. So, like, I gotta think about that one. Almost like, is that just a writing thing, or is that something done specifically? Like,
So I feel like it's purposeful. I feel like, yeah, it's done on the writing level. Like, look, we'll show you what might be some clues, but then very quickly afterwards, we're going to up the stakes emotionally and action wise, so that whatever you think you have seen is like quickly obfuscated by some huge event.
yeah, no, okay. So, oh, okay. So you believe that it's the writers are doing it to throw you off, but not
I
necessarily the
do.
town is doing it.
Yeah, Yeah, I actually do think that I think it's purposeful on the writing side. I don't think it's not the writers saying that the town is, trying to throw people off,
Oh,
because if
okay.
that were the case, then Victor would be more sort of under attack than he actually is. Because clearly he knows some stuff, you know.
Hmm.
I if we go back to a previous episode and we think about the timing of when those dogs came into the forest, the dogs came into the forest after uh, Ethan and Victor did the experiment with the rocks.
Hmm.
And that felt important and purposeful, like, well, you're not actually supposed to know what that is. But immediately after that, we end up with a confrontation where Ethan and his dad, where Ethan's dad, where Jim has this, huge confrontation with Victor, and it feels like what we just learned that was like mind blowing about these portals where things can go in and come out in other places was almost not erased, but like made less than, because of the huge reaction that Jim had, and where it almost felt like, Victor was about to seriously be harmed. I don't know, there's just something so interesting about this particular type of storytelling, which I kind of like. I just thought it was super
Yeah, and,
interesting.
and
And
Victor had that gun too.
right, right. And he basically, what does he do? He uses it to scare the dogs away.
You're right. But
Um
also to say back away too.
mhm. Well, that's just it. I don't know. I feel like I don't know enough about Victor yet to be able to make that kind of determination. But Victor's alive in an age where it feels like a lot of people die and he doesn't.
Hmm.
So clearly he's got some survival skills that are not just I'm just a crazy person, wondering if the trees are moving. Yeah, I feel like that's definitely true. Um, okay, let's talk real quick about Boyd. Boyd's plan, which I really kind of don't know what is going on with that in this episode.
Hmm.
Uh, but he goes to his wife's grave, and his wife Abby, is her grave is not in the town's graveyard. That doesn't seem uh that seems purposeful as well.
Hmm.
Why is she buried outside in this field of wildflowers? Why is she there and not in the town graveyard?
Hmm.
I don't know what the answer to that is, but it's clear that something is different about Boyd burying Abby here, or having her grave be here. I don't know what that means,
Do you
but
think? Do you think maybe she did something to endanger the lives of the town, possibly?
I don't know. I don't know. Or did Father Cautry say that she couldn't be buried in the town graveyard because she committed suicide? Because if you commit suicide in the Catholic faith, at least you can't be buried in consecrated ground.
Hmm.
That
Do,
I
do we know that she committed suicide?
No, that I'm just saying, like, those are the questions that I had in my head.
Hmm.
I don't know. And but I think what we can definitely tell is that something different happened with Abby than anybody else, at least in terms of where Boyd buried her. He didn't want her to be buried, or he didn't bury her in the town cemetery. And everybody else is buried there. I mean, we've already had numerous burials there. Okay, but I'm also going to say uh, that toward the end of this episode, one of the
Mhm.
most disturbing things happens, and that is Victor begins to talk again about uh, what's going on with the two cars, and that he thinks he might maybe not know, but he thinks something is going on, and he starts digging a mass grave. There's I don't know how many there are. One, two, three, four, five, six, seven, maybe. Um, I can't remember how many he actually starts, but he says he's getting a head start this time. How crazy is that? It makes Victor such an interesting character. It's absolutely, really, I don't know, something crazy about that. Okay, let's work a little bit on something else here. So I don't know what Boyd's plan is about going into the forest, but he has some kind of idea about going into the forest to do something, and maybe that's going to be the way that they all get home. Um, so I'm really intrigued about what that might be. Somebody mentioned the fact that the monsters don't have a name. You know how in The Walking Dead they're the walkers. How in like Resident Evil, they have names for the liquors and the whatever. They have no names for these monsters. They're just the things.
Monsters.
Yeah,
They're just the monsters.
Things.
Monsters Inc.
Yeah, it's weird. Like you'd think that after all this time that they would develop some kind of name for it, but my brain goes to, well, maybe they don't have names because no one is in the town long enough to really sort of remember. Like they don't have that collective memory of what these things would be called. Maybe that's why. I don't know that that's true. I just think that might be the case. So, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, that is strange that they would have some kind of nickname. You would think they would have some kind of nickname, but they really don't.
Just a small one.
Yeah, maybe as the show goes on, maybe they'll develop one. Probably not though. But yeah.
It feels weird also that we're not given a name that we can associate these creatures with, because that feels like, from a writing perspective, something that you would do so that anytime that name is mentioned you immediately feel creepy dread,
Or maybe as it goes along we'll find out what their true names are. Maybe that's what it is.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe that's absolutely the way. Yep. So far, I'm just going with the idea that basically all of these beings are basically the crows that we see, and yeah, that's I'll just go with that for now. Okay, so let's switch back to Sarah saying, "Hey, let's go view the goats. Let's go hang out with the goats." And of course, Sarah doesn't realize that Tabitha is going to cling to Ethan as much as she is, because of course there was the whole Victor thing. So she's right now, obviously everybody is being very overprotective of Ethan for good reason.
Mm-hmm.
And so Sarah brings Ethan to the barnyard, and Tabitha's like, yeah, let's have a conversation. Ethan's petting a goat, everything's great. And all of a sudden Sarah says that she's going to show Tabitha a talisman that's in the barn in case she ever needs to go there after dark. And Tabitha goes in, and I'm trying to think of a good way to say this. There is something about the way that Sarah basically announces sort of to Tabitha that like this is for the best. And I feel like Tabitha recognizes immediately that something bad is going to happen, obviously. I mean, if I were locked in somebody's barn, I would be thinking the same thing. The lack of immediate action that Sarah takes tells me that Sarah is still really struggling with this, because if and I mean, maybe it's just for our effect, I don't know. How did you see the lead up into what Sarah is going to do, and like how long that felt like it took?
Oh man, I mean, obviously, yeah, she is. Look, I don't think she wants to murder people. She doesn't.
No.
That's not what she wants to do, but she feels like she's compelled to do or has to do it. So yeah, I would say that she had to gin up the courage, And even when Ethan escapes, by kicking her in the knee, you
Mm-hmm.
know, uh, I mean, she could have fought harder to keep him, but I think in a way she was relieved that she didn't do it.
Right. Well, and then we see, so Ethan escapes basically her hold, and we see Nathan.
Her brother.
And Nathan, right. Nathan ends up standing inches away from her, and he's saying, Sarah, don't do it, don't do it. And Sarah ends up cutting Ethan's throat by accident. Man, what a. That's crazy. That whole thing was so crazy. And uh, I have to say that this really caught me off guard. Like, oof, man, how first of all, how horrible for Tabitha to be in locked in the room and know that there's like stuff going on outside, hearing all of this back and forth and not being able to protect your kid. And then in the barnyard with the goats is this just again, who are the real monsters? The people? Or is this like a mix of it's the monsters and the people? Like the people are behaving in a way that makes me feel like, man, there are just as many bad things happening people to people that there are happening with these monsters, um, which it feels really super crazy. So what? I mean, I don't know how to sort of like summarize everything that was happening in there, but how did you feel about all of that stuff going down in the barnyard?
Oh my God. Every show needs, to me, shows, movies, whatever, they need moments.
Hmm.
Things that you will remember, that will stay itched into your brain. And that was definitely one of those moments. And poor Nathan, who was just seemed like a really great guy, who all he wanted to do was take care of his sister, paid the ultimate price by,
Right.
yeah.
And then, okay, so it seems like everybody who's anybody is now basically at the barn, right? I mean, like everybody is standing there, probably from the town, and uh, Father Kotri comes back and basically just confirms that Sarah has disappeared,
Hmm.
which also to me at in that moment felt weird because it felt to me like, well, why? Where would I don't know. It just felt weird. It really did. It didn't feel right. Like, why was Sarah running? I mean, she didn't run from anything else. I don't know. It just felt strange. Why would she have? I don't know. Anyway, that whole thing felt kind of strange. Uh, Tabitha carries Ethan back to the house, and um, Father Kotri tells Boyd and Jim that Sarah has run off, and that if she doesn't come back after dark or before dark, then quote unquote, it's handled. Meaning that the monsters will basically take care of whatever they can't take care of.
Right.
Okay. And then Jim says uh, that he doesn't understand why they are all treating this like it is Mayberry. Why it's, an Andy Griffith episode. And I have to say, for the first time, I actually agree with Jim. What do you
Right.
think?
No, yeah. Yeah, he said exactly what I've been saying for the last couple of episodes. Is they're acting like this is Mayberry, Mayberry with monsters.
Uh-huh.
So, yeah. No, he said what I think the audience is saying at home.
So Julie is now Ethan went to go find Julie. Julie brings Ethan back. The whole family is reunited. Julie takes Nathan upstairs, and then uh Tabitha writes on the whiteboard that is their wall, "Did we survive the crash?"
Mm-hmm.
So are they actually dead? And if that's the case, then the question again runs back to, are we in hell? Is this our purgatory? That kind of thing. Um, so interesting that I feel like at this point that question opens up the door, which I've been hinting at all along, because I feel like everything in the show is a detail and a mystery. And in this episode, I started to think, oh, you know what? Maybe it's not. Maybe things are a lot simpler than I actually thought they were.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe the nature of her question is it is basically the answer to all of our questions, which is, hey guys, maybe not everything is a mystery, and maybe it's just this is the way that things are. And that redefined for me how I'm thinking about this series altogether. um it was such a weird moment in my thinking about what was happening here, where I just started thinking, oh, you know what? Maybe all my attention to detail isn't actually as important as I thought it was. Maybe all of the things that are happening that I thought, oh, maybe this is a red herring, maybe it's a this, maybe those things don't even matter. And maybe there is a more universal truth being applied to this that will simply satiate all of the gaps that I'm seeing in the story by filling it in with, well, you're dead. And I don't know. What did you think about her question?
I think it's just something that they have to address because everybody's thinking, is this purgatory? I think they want to just kill that off so that the audience can move on, to not even have that as a something that they're thinking about. Is this possibly what it is?
Well, I kind of hope that that's the case, because I have invested a lot of thinking into this isn't a purgatory, that it isn't hell, that there is something else that is of a supernatural division happening here. And so I hope that that's the case. But I also feel like by opening that door, they're sort of allowing us to think about this as if, like what Father Khatri says, does it matter?
Mhm.
No matter what's happening, are we dead, are we not dead, does it actually matter? And I felt like that was a good moment of clarity. So let's hit the last piece of this, which is Boyd in the diner hearing Lyle Lovett's "If I Had a Boat."
Right.
That's the song that played on the jukebox, right? And then he says, "Okay, I got my sign." Apparently, that is what Boyd's thinking. Something about "if I had a boat." And it seems to indicate to me, okay, this is the reason that we saw everybody up at that place earlier, that there is some kind of body of water that we are not aware of at the moment, but that clearly Boyd is thinking maybe this is the escape. I don't know.
And it's a
Okay.
lot. I think it's a lost reference too,
Yeah?
because remember,
Tell us.
at the end of season 2, he sailed away on a boat
Oh, that's right. Oh, yeah.
with his
The-
his son. Oh, spoiler alert!
Yeah, it's been a hot minute since Lost was on the air. I think we're pretty safe.
Mhm.
We don't even know, we haven't even seen a boat, so we don't really know even what that might be, and we don't even really know exactly where he's thinking that they might be able to go. But what I think is happening in terms of who our weakest characters are, I feel like they're the weakest characters only by story design, and that they are about to take on a bigger role in the story. Like we establish a lot around characters that are very important, and now more of the story can sort of be uncovered, if you will.
Mhm.
I feel like this was a really, really great episode. What are your closing thoughts?
No, I mean, great episode, had great moments in it, and I feel like it's a great lead into the next episode.
I have to say that this episode in particular really kept me afloat in the idea that they
Get it?
keep world building in a way that is interesting to us without getting too mired in the details of the world building itself. And that's a skill that is definitely not utilized a lot, and sometimes when they try to utilize it, it falls flat. In this case, it really does work. I mean, I am just as hooked as I was after the first and second episode. So, yes. So, okay, so I think that's it for this episode. How can we find you on social media, Kinte?
Sure. You can get me at Kinte F on Twitter, at Kinte Ferguson, that's Fergerson, on Instagram. And of course, the website is theindyradio.com. That's the THEINDY radio.com. Jen, how can people get you?
People can find me at moviesandmeals.com. And our next episode, which is also kind of an interesting one and definitely feels like it is like it's going to be something fabulous, is oh wait, what is the name of the next episode? The name of the next
74?
episode, Book 74. Thank you. We have a lot of unanswered questions to get to, and I think this episode actually does a nice job of tying up some loose ends. So we'll look forward to talking about that one next time.
All right, you guys have a good one.